This is Matthew McConaughey.
Natalie Portman.
James Patterson.
Michael Ian Black.
And you are listening to
Five Questions
with Dan
Schawbel.
Ed, welcome to Five Questions.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, it's great to have you here. I've played Mortal Kombat since the 90s, of course, when it was first introduced. But I'm curious, how did your time spent on pinball games inspire the creation of Mortal Kombat?
Well, my time spent on pinball machines, I don't know if that inspired Mortal Kombat as much as it kind of prepared me. The work ethic in Chicago, or at least in Williams Electronics at the time, was very much dedicated and very, everybody just by example worked really hard, and I think that pinball experience instilled that in me, which kind of carried even to this day, 30 plus years later. So I think its inspiration was just in the amount that you just kind of dedicate yourself to to whatever project you're in.
And that's really a good way to make something successful. It's not just having the idea, but it's the execution. A lot of people have ideas, but to follow through is a whole different story, as you know, in experience.
Perspiration can sometimes be more important than inspiration.
Well said. And how has your role working on Mortal Kombat evolved since the first game in 1992?
My role is completely different now. In 1992, I was part of a team of four, right? And those four people created the first Mortal Kombat game. I was the only programmer. There was no such thing as a designer, right? It was John Tobias and I were the creators of the game, and John did art. I did programming, another guy did background art, and another guy did audio, and that was the extent of it. Now, I am one of about hundreds of people who work on the game, and I'm much more from a like a kind of director kind of role, steering the ship, so to speak. I haven't done programming for 15, 20 years. And it's, there's so many more moving parts, so many more variables involved that there's no possible way I could actually create content. So it's much more ideas, direction, changing as the challenges kind of approach us. That's probably how I would describe the difference.
I remember back in the 90s walking into an arcade, even if it was at Chuck E. Cheese or back then, and Mortal Kombat was everywhere. It was ubiquitous. You couldn't really walk into an arcade without seeing the Simpsons arcade, Turtles arcade, and a few others. But Mortal Kombat, definitely, I think most people recognize it from those years, especially. And now it's hit multi-generations, right? Which is really cool. And it must be amazing for you because you were at the foundation of developing the IP in the game. So you get to see people play it, and it's evolved really. And I think what really drew people to it is, from a differentiation standpoint, for me being a teenager back then, was the fatalities, right? It's there were some fighting games back then, but nothing that gruesome. And nothing where you had to pound the buttons a certain way in order to finish him, right? And I think that drew a lot of people to the arcade machine too, because it's oh, someone's about to do this, so we got to go check this out. And so I thought that was the true part of the true genius behind it, aside from obviously the cool characters and the moves and all of that. But now you've taken it with the new game, Mortal Kombat 1. Why did you decide to make or work with this team to make the new Mortal Kombat 1 game franchise? And why is it a reboot? And what makes this one really unique compared to the others?
Yeah, well, just like you said, I think a lot of people come to me and say that they have that clear memory. It's I walked into this pizza parlor, this arcade, this bowling alley, and I saw it, and then I took it all in. And at the time, I believe it's photorealistic look was the thing that got your attention. All of a sudden, there was like real people, at least the perception was real people.
Not cartoons.
Exactly, exactly. And it wasn't drawn graphics, it was digitized graphics. And so after that, we continued with graphic improvements, slowly increasing the cast of characters. Fast forward 11 games later, right? 11 games, 30 years later, we had a cast of almost 100 characters. We had taken our main characters, Liu Kang, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Raiden, through a 30-year arc that we really felt we hit the absolute peak of where that story could go. We could not think of a yet more powerful villain that made the last one look weak. And so we felt like we hit a ceiling, and it just felt like time to reset everything. We knew we wanted to keep the characters because those are the things that the players are falling in love with, is like, don't you dare get rid of Scorpion. Don't you dare get rid of Sub-Zero.
Especially if someone's new picking up the game who hasn't played since the 90s. They're like, well, I want to play as Raiden or Sub-Zero or one of those Reptile or whatever, one of those characters, because that's who they were familiar with. And that's the nostalgia they have.
Yeah, there are certain characters that we just have to have, and there's no way we're going to remove them from it. So we decided to tell a brand new story, reintroduce these characters with new origins, new relationships with each other. And so it's a clean slate with familiar characters. And that was kind of like the motivation, because we've had so many, 11 installations before that.
And in today's world, I mean, technology's really changed. I mean, we weren't talking in the 90s. No one even used the word AR, VR, AI. Like, there's so many new technologies. How do you think that's driving the development of, let's say, Mortal Kombat, or just future installments, or just the whole video game industry moving forward?
Well, from my perspective, I think that what AR and VR does is it lets you make a game, a mechanic, from a new visual perspective, right? Right, because a lot of times, it's a third-person game. You're controlling somebody that's on the screen, and you have your controller. And then first-person shooters came about, which is kind of like you're looking through the eyes of, somebody with some kind of a weapon and doing that. And I think AR and VR could be that next evolution, right? So you're in your space, right? And the game is dynamically changing itself based on your view, your perspective. And so I think, while I don't think that that's been tapped and that's been exploited enough, there's some games, Beat Saber and stuff like that, that have really kind of resonated. But I think we've yet to see that killer game application that will absolutely showcase and make the most out of that thing. But right there, AR the stage is set for it to do it, I believe. And it's just a matter of somebody cracking that nut.
It's almost like the difference between you're playing the character, like playing as the character in a game, versus you're almost the character. If it's VR, it's almost like that's you maybe punching and doing various kicks and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that it's wired to your normal movements, right? Like you move your head to look as opposed to moving your screen, that I think will also make it feel that much more immersive, that much more, in your system.
It's almost like taking cosplaying or Halloween to the next level.
Yeah.
And what's your best piece of career advice?
If you're talking about video game development or something like that, my best piece of career advice would be master something. I don't think you can kind of enter the video game and say, I want to be a director, I want to lead things. You need to get in and either become a great animator, a great 3D character modeler, a great audio engineer, game design, mechanics, gameplay, technology, audio. There's so many different disciplines that you can get your foot in the door and master that. Everybody will come to you. You will draw good people towards you, And that's how you'll kind of get your foot in the door and kind of move up.
I love that. Yeah, you're becoming a subject matter expert so that people are aware of you, they seek you out, and from there you can build a bigger reputation through that foundation and take on larger roles. Basically, how you develop your career.
Yep.
Well, that's great advice, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.